I'd like to call to order the planning board meeting of August 26, 2001 to order. Can I get a roll call of the members, please? Here. Thank you. And now I'd like to do an approval of the minutes for April 8th, 2021.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from April 8th.
Get a second? Thank you. For the approval of the minutes April 8th of 2021, can I, all in favor, say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes. Next up, do a public hearing for the zone change application. Dylan, you go over that first, is that correct? Mr. Pipinich?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. I'll give a staff report and a presentation. So zone change application 21-3 is application by Matt Nisler and Brown and Associates, and the application is to change the zoning designation for an area that's zoned R1 and R2, single family and two family residential, to R3 to accommodate multifamily residential. The site in question is privately owned, mostly of vacant land. There are 12 single-family homes in here. If you look at the screen, you can see the aerial photograph. This area is located just east of East Middle School. It's between Grand Avenue and Argyle Street. Continental Drive is on the right there. It's between East Middle School and Continental Drive. Here's an aerial photograph. So this photograph shows the zoning designations. The light yellow on the left is R1, single family residentially zoned now. R2 is the darker color yellow. That's the east 2/3 of the proposal. And here's a little tighter aerial photograph. So staff findings: the applicant owns approximately 4.5 acres, 4.7 acres of the 16.5 acre subject area. Upon receiving the application, the planning department sent out certified letters to all the other landowners. 7 landowners have voiced opinions to the proposed change, and 6 have objected to the change. Most of them owned single family homes within the area. A large landowner on the east there is Dr. Phil Milanovich, and he supported the application. So a background with the Montana Code annotated. Zoning boundaries may be amended, supplemented, changed, modified, or repealed. Amendments may not become effective upon a favorable vote of 2/3 of the present and voting members of the city or town council when a protest against the change is signed by 25% or more of the landowners in the area, the lots included or within 150 feet of the proposed change. So the process, how this works, is this is a public hearing at the planning board. The planning board will make a recommendation to the council of commissioners. A majority vote would pass or fail depending on the motion at the council of commissioners. But if there is a signed protest of 25% or more of those landowners, then it needs 2/3 vote from council to pass. So there are 14 criteria that staff evaluated for zone change. The first one is the zoning designation in accordance with the comprehensive plan. So you're all aware of the comprehensive plan. The place type designation for this area is traditional neighborhood. And if you remember, the traditional neighborhood place type favors single-family homes in the comprehensive plan. It's single-family homes with detached garages, lots, and blocks, similar to most of the flat area. However, it does allow for some increased density, such as multifamily housing. It gears more towards design than use. So in certain circumstances, that place type does support higher density multifamily housing. So this proposal is in accordance with the comprehensive plan place type. In other objectives of the comprehensive plan, a major objective of our implementation matrix is promoting infill development. This zone change would accomplish that. Currently, multifamily structures only make up 8.9% of the total housing in the county, and there's a shortage of multifamily options. And another major objective of the comprehensive plan is to promote affordability in housing in a comprehensive manner, which is becoming more of an issue in Butte-Silver. So the proposal meets the general intent and character of the traditional neighborhood while also meeting a lot of the several goals and objectives of the Butte-Silver community as a whole that's listed in the comprehensive plan. The second criteria is the new zoning designated to lessen congestion in the streets. The proposed change from single family and two family to multifamily residence will most likely increase traffic along adjacent streets. The increased density will generate more traffic than current residential uses. It would promote development in this area, and again, a lot of this area is vacant right now, so that it would increase traffic in the streets. Garfield, Lafayette, Gladstone are the north and south streets in the area, and they are Grand Avenue and Continental Drive bound the subject parcel to the north and the east. Garfield, Lafayette, and Gladstone are all standard residential streets with no sidewalks or curb and gutter. Grand Avenue and Continental Drive are major arterial streets that would most likely serve the majority of the increased traffic in the area. The third criteria is, will the new zoning promote health and the general welfare? This is a pretty broad question. So there are development standards of the R3 zone with density, setbacks. R3 does not have lot coverage requirements. But as far as your general health and welfare, your building codes pretty much takes that. Our building codes are county-wide. So the new zoning wouldn't really affect or change the health and the general welfare in those regards because those standards are already set in the zoning ordinance. Will the new zoning secure safety from fire, panic, and other dangers? Again, this is infill development, so it's serviced by fire department already, serviced by police services already, and it promotes efficiency of public services. Will the new zoning provide adequate air and light? So again, the building and zoning requirements for the R3 zone are designed to ensure that adequate light and air are provided to any developments. You know, the zoning code has sight vision requirements, things like that, that promote that health and safety and adequate light and air. Any new buildings would be required to get building permits and meet those standards of setbacks and such from lot lines. Criteria number 6 is, will the new zoning prevent overcrowding of the land? So overcrowding of lands is controlled by development standards that provide maximum densities for development and the availability of services for development. Again, this is changing to a zoning designation that's already established in the zoning ordinance. The R3 zone has density standards existing already. And also, any future development would require that a developer analyze available infrastructure and confirm that existing systems or expansions can serve the future development. That being said, a change in zoning designation to multifamily residential would allow for the increase of density in the area, particularly on the vacant land. However, the R3 zoning does have density standards that require 6,000 square feet for the first dwelling unit and an additional 1,500 square feet of lot area for each additional dwelling. So a single family home needs 6,000 square feet of lot area. A duplex needs 7,500, triplex needs 9,000, fourplex needs 10,500, and so on. Many of the lots in the adjacent residentially zoned areas, because they were developed prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance, are what are called legal non-conforming lots of substandard size. Let me go back to that aerial photograph and kind of show you, as you can see to the south, that a lot of those lots are smaller than your standard lot size. So they're 30 by 100, 45 by 100, they're 3,000, 4,500 square feet, somewhere around in there. There are a few larger ones that have combined over the years, but overall area in the surrounding area is more dense than your typical R1 or R2 zoning requirements, because these were all built out before the zoning ordinance. So the density is actually already there. This, however, would allow for increased density on the vacant lots, because if it were to stay R1 or R2, then they would have to follow those 6,000 or 7,500 square foot lots and wouldn't allow that increased density. So will the new zoning avoid undue concentration of population? Again, this is a very similar question. There are many homes on those 3,000 square foot lots. So in this area, you know, there's 2 homes for 6,000 square feet in a lot of instances, instead of the one that's allowed by the zoning ordinance now. So what's existing is tighter density than a new R1 or R2 neighborhood would be. But again, changing to R3 does encourage a tighter density for the undeveloped portions of the lot. Will the new zoning facilitate adequate provision of transportation, water, sewage, schools, parks, fire, police, and other public improvements? As you can see in this picture, and we've been talking about, a lot of this land is vacant. The land, particularly on the east, has platted streets and alleys in it that are not improved. And those obviously do not have municipal services such as sewer and water in there. A benefit to changing this zoning designation is that it would promote the extension of those services to this area. It is more economically feasible to extend water and sewer or build a street to accommodate multifamily housing than it is for single family housing, just from a economics of scale standpoint. A lot of the land in this area hasn't been developed recently, with that lack of infrastructure being a financial reason for that. So these things such as water, sewer, and all of that would need to be extended for the development to happen in this area. And this change in zoning to allow the increased density would promote that. Does the new zoning give reasonable consideration to the character of the district? Again, as I said, this is the traditional neighborhood place type. If design of multifamily houses is done correctly, it could match that. One thing that is to note is there are several multifamily housing units in the area now, which were permitted by use variance from the Zoning Board of Adjustment and are considered legal non-conforming uses in that area now. And this would change those designations to conforming. It would not, however, change the designation of any of the single family homes, because the R3 zone does allow single family and 2-family homes. So it would not make anything non-conforming, but it would make things in the area, houses and uses more conforming. Does the new zoning give reasonable consideration to suitability of the property for particular uses? The R3 zoning designation is the broadest residential zone. It allows single family, two family, multifamily uses, so it gives consideration to all types of residential development. The zoning ordinance would allow for and would provide for development standards for any additions or new construction, such as off-street parking, building setbacks, etc. The next question is, was the zoning adopted with a view to conserving the value of buildings? Again, this doesn't create any more non-conforming buildings, so we wouldn't be hindering any existing property owners in the area as to restrictions of what they could or couldn't build. Anything that they could build now would be a permitted use in the R3 as well. Will the new zoning encourage the most appropriate use of land throughout the county or municipal area? So I did a little research into the R3 zone land county-wide. We have 570 acres approximately of R3 zoned land. 16% of that is vacant, and only 4 parcels are large enough to accommodate a multifamily development. That is without this proposal. So to encourage a more diverse housing market, we are basically out of R3 zoned land. And the goals in the comprehensive plan have always been to, encourage affordable housing, encourage more types of housing, and the R3 zone and that multifamily zone is missing some of that. A lot of the multifamily housing developments we've seen in the past few years have been on commercially zoned land. They're permitted use in commercial zone land as well. So the overall need, the county is showing that we need that type of housing, and as of right now, we are taking our commercial space to build it. So it is definitely needed in the community, is multifamily housing zoned areas. Does the new zoning correct a mistake or oversight that occurred in the past when an inappropriate zoning or category was applied to the area? Staff doesn't believe this was a mistake. Zoning ordinance was adopted 40 years ago, has had 183 minor amendments to it since then, but this is just a change that better reflects the community needs as it moves forward. Will the new zoning better reflect the current situation in an area or neighborhood, because since the original zoning was adopted, the area has changed significantly in terms of adjacent land uses? As you can see in this picture, this is where the multifamily apartment complex that was constructed a few years ago in the middle of this proposed area. The development in this area has been mainly multifamily housing, but there has also been some single family housings. I apologize for the small picture, but you can see back here, there's a single family house here. These are all multifamily houses. Behind here is a row of single family homes. I think there's 6 or 7 of them. So the type of development has been a mixture of residential uses. So in conclusion, and after evaluating the 14 criteria, staff recommends that the planning board recommend approval of this zone change application to the council of commissioners. With that, I would wrap up the presentation and welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Pipinich. One thing, was this public hearing advertised?
Sorry, we missed that step. Yes, it was.
Thank you. At this time, does any of the board members have any questions or concerns? Julie?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Pivenich, on the comprehensive plan that was just put out last year, I noticed that this was called a suburban mixed neighborhood, and it looked as though the suburban mix was actually drawn in the map on the border, like maybe on Continental Drive, but not going down the corridor to Grand. Can you speak to that?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Jackshaw, this place type is actually traditional neighborhood. The suburban mix is a little bit further to the north. So the traditional neighborhood place type is definitely geared towards single-family residential. But as you may recall, the comprehensive plan is more geared towards look and feel than of use. It specifically states in the comprehensive plan in the traditional place type that higher densities such as duplexes, triplexes, and even multifamily can be permitted. It's more based on the design of those types of developments. So they want lots and blocks, and the feel of a traditional neighborhood is the gear of that comprehensive plan for the place type specifically.
Thank you, Dylan. Mr. McLeod?
Dylan, do you mind pulling up that aerial map you had? I just got a question on that. So that's not reflective of the current multifamily that's next to Milanovich, is that correct? Or am maybe I just don't see it clearly.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McLeod, no, Google Earth hasn't updated their aerial photographs
Okay.
recently.
Yeah.
It is right here, right in the center of this. This is where that multifamily complex is currently.
Or is it east of that, I believe?
It's right here. They built Teal Street right here. And the development is right here.
Okay.
And then there is now a single family home on this lot that was built this year, or last year.
If I could ask one more question. But the single family, other than the one you just mentioned, that's pretty reflective there of the aerial? I mean, that's the houses that are there now are kind of shown on that map?
That's correct. All these single family homes are obviously still here. There's multifamily development here, and there's a single family home here.
And when I think there were 7 folks that had responded, 1 in favor, 6 against. Do we just send those to the adjacent homes, or does it go to a broader swath than that?
We sent a certified letter to everybody that owned property within the boundary.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the newspaper ad and the signs were the notice for the surrounding neighbors.
Any more questions? Mr. Pippin, sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the applicant plan on a development? I mean, we're doing a zone change here, but the applicant must own some land in there and be planning I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but just curious.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sally, yes, absolutely. And the applicant is in the audience and can speak to that more, but they purchased this large portion next to East Middle School and are planning if this is to be approved, a multifamily complex on that piece of ground.
Thank you. I do have one question for you, Dylan. Regarding the sewer and the water that needs to be put over there, is that going to be at the owner's expense?
Mr. Chairman, yes. So the sewer, water, and any roads that would need to be constructed to build out anything in here would be at the developer's expense.
Thank you.
Which is part of the reason that this land hasn't been developed, is because the zoning requires either one single family or 2 family homes, and it costs a lot of money to extend those services.
Thank you. Any more questions? Go ahead, Bart.
So Dylan, the part on the right then isn't being developed right now, it's just the piece across from each junior high?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Riley, The applicant has a proposal for this piece right here. This is the reason for the zone change application. As you may recall, when we were developing the comprehensive plan or just zoning in reality, you look at zoning in a comprehensive manner and change areas that are going to complement each other and not just areas for specific developments. So it makes a lot of sense that if this area were to change to multifamily, that this area does too, because it is vacant and is prime for development because of its being vacant, and should be in accordance with what is surrounding. So you look at larger pieces, larger parcels, big picture viewing is how we are tackling zoning.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any questions? Going once, going. So this time we're going to start the public hearing process. Please note all questions and comments will be directed towards the chairman. There will be 3 calls for proponents and 3 calls for opponents. The applicant will be able to answer questions after the comments, then the public hearing will be closed. So at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Make the first call for proponents.
Chad Ball, I'm working on behalf of Matt Nisler. He is the applicant for this. I can't say much more than what Dylan already said. We don't have a set proposal of what Matt wants to do east of the middle school there. It's kind of in flux, but for the overall proposal, I mean, Dylan, can you kind of show, I mean, the area that is block 19 and block 20, which is that area east of the middle school, it has vacated streets and alleys. This could be developed as a single-family residential subdivision, really. But most of this is already platted with streets and alleys and blocks and lots. The proposal would actually be less dense in this area than, as Dylan mentioned, as if it was going to be single-family residential. I mean, from what I've looked at the comprehensive plan, we're really, I mean, as Dylan said, R3 is allowed, multifamily residential is allowed in a traditional neighborhood. I don't really have a whole lot to add besides that Matt Nisler definitely owns that parcel right now and is looking to develop some sort of a high-density multifamily complex in that area. That's all I really have to add. Any questions?
Mr. McLeod.
Chad, when you reference less dense, single-family versus multifamily, are you talking units or people?
Lot size. I mean, if you have a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, the lot size gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. So if you had single-family residential with 6,000 square feet each lot, you can fit a lot of houses in there, you know. So yeah, I'm basically referencing a multifamily development.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up is I think most folks that are opposed to these type of things aren't worried about the number of units and the number of people that are in them is typically what the
right, which
blowback
we're going to have to comply with R3 zone if this
Right.
gets changed with parking, lot size,
Okay.
building size, building height, setbacks, all those things.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Ball? Cal, the second call for proponents. Third call for proponents. At this time, I'd like to make the first call for opponents. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Dale Reynolds. I live at 1617 Lafayette, third house in from Grand. The lot in question is directly behind my house. I'd love to see it developed. Okay, I'll go on record right there. But as far as more apartments, you know, I've seen a quote-unquote possible proposal of up to 15 units in that part, which if they're all fourplexes like they put in to the east of Lafayette, where they put in the 6 units, you know, that's another 60 families that are moving in. One more block to the west, there's another 7 fourplexes. So, you know, I don't understand how we can continue to call this a neighborhood when every time we turn around, we're getting another fourplex, 6 and 7 at a time, possibly 15 at the part there by East Junior High. The next part of that is school goes in 9 months out of 12. I look directly across the field and I watch the parents dropping off the kids. I watch the kids never pay attention to what they're doing, crossing the streets. So to add that many more vehicles into that area, you know, most people go to work, you know, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. I do not feel that it's exactly the safest thing to be adding as far as around the school also. You know, if they want to put housing in, you know, put in the single dwelling, put in duplexes. But, you know, that's probably going to add an extra maybe 20 families at the most instead of 60. And, you know, we already truthfully kind of lost the neighborhood feeling when the other 6 went in. You know, we talk to our neighbors, everybody's got their feelings about the neighborhood, and we do talk. But I can honestly say they've been there probably about 18 months now. You know, it's just continual turnover. You never meet anybody from there. They have no ownership within the neighborhood. And, you know, that's the biggest part. That's what a neighborhood's about. Have your family, have your friends, you know, feel good about being in that part. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Dave Lauderman, and I live at 2604 Locust Street. I'd like to comment on the proposed zoning variance. The 2 areas I would like to speak on are neighborhoods and building wealth. I believe that single and 2 residence homes lead to home ownership and having a stake in the area. Home ownership leads folks towards putting their roots down and developing a real interest in the area. People take pride in owning their homes, and this leads to good neighborhoods where crime is mitigated and kids can grow up safe and secure. People get to know their neighbors, and this creates bonds in the community. This area of town already has 2 large apartment complexes. When people rent and don't buy, they're not attached to the area. They move in and out, don't care as much about the goings-on around them. The land is right next to the school, and I believe kids will be in a safer environment if homes are built rather than near an apartment complex that has people moving in and out. One of the best ways for the common person to gain wealth is through home ownership. I'll be happy to give you an example. When I moved to Butte in 2000, I put a small down payment on my home. 21 years later, I fully own the place, and my investment is worth over 15 times what the down payment was. If I would have just moved to Butte and rented for 21 years, I would have nothing to show for it. This kind of investment leads to security and the ability to improve your standing in life. If this apartment complex is allowed, only the developer and the landlord stand to gain anything. In my mind, there's no comparison between the two. There are very good examples of starter homes that would be perfect for this area. There's one home that was just built on the other side of Garfield that fits right in with what this area has to offer. The type of homes that Habitat for Humanity has built close to the area would also be appropriate here. Please consider what is best for the most people, the area, the middle school, and keep the zoning as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, second call for opponents.
Just quickly, with all due respect to the gentlemen who have spoke,
So one sec, so Mr. Ball, this is for opponents right now.
oh, sorry, what?
This is for anybody opposing the
Oh,
zoning
I'm
change
sorry.
right now. Thank you. So I'll do a third and final call for anybody opposing this. See none. So now, applicant, you can answer any questions or comments at this time.
Thank you. Shortly, as I said, with due respect to the gentlemen that have spoke, not everybody gets to own a home or has the advantage to own a home. We're short on R3 zones within this county, and people need a place to go. People need a place to rent. People are working, coming into work into Butte, and this would be a good opportunity for them. So owning a home is great. Having a neighborhood with people who own homes is great, but not everybody has that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. So if there's none of the other comments or any questions at this point, I was going to close the public hearing. I have to hit can I hit this again? I close the public hearing now. At this time, we'll take a board discussion on on how we want to proceed.
Josh?
Mr. McLeod.
Dylan, quick question. Is it, of that parcel that we're discussing, is it easily defined what's R2 and what's R1 in there? I mean, in general?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McLeod,
You
I
probably-
apologize, they're kind of similar color, but the lighter colored yellow over here is R1.
Okay,
And this is R2.
yeah.
Follow up, Mike.
Are you ready for comments, or?
Yes, or any questions, or, yeah, go ahead, comments. I think questions and comments at this point. Now, we're at a board discussion right now.
Okay, if I could offer,
Yes.
I struggle with this one, because I can tell you firsthand, we really have a lack of R3. There's no argument about that. And I understand, if I understand correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that what we're really trying to do in the comprehensive plan is not, for lack of a better term, spot zone everything. Use variances like the fourplexes that went in, that kind of thing. But when I look at this, you know, I think of folks that own single-family homes in that area, and when they bought those homes, you know, they knew what they were buying into, and to change it, it impacts them. So, not to spot zone, but just like the Milanovich piece, I'll call it, against Continental Drive, is kind of by itself. It's bordered by the fourplexes to the west, it's Grand Avenue to the north, Continental, and then, I don't know if I'm saying it right, not the McQueen, but the other, East Side Athletic Club, which doesn't have an impact, but when you get over by the other parcel to the west, you know, you're adjacent to these folks that have homes, are looking right out their back window. I can't tell you that I've completely made up my mind, but that's just my general observation when I look at this. There's not a lot of folks that are impacted, but the folks that are there, they're impacted. Or could be, I should say, could be. So that's just my general comments to get started.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. Any other questions, concerns?
Mr. Chairman, I would just offer, I agree with what Mike is saying. I mean, when I look at this, I could almost see it if it was on the Continental side being okay, because that kind of buffers the neighborhood and acts as a buffer to development. But for me, to change a zone to R3, in the hopes that we do put in more R3 housing, I just don't see it. And I think that, you know, lucky for me where I live, we've had some growth. We've had some R2 properties put into our neighborhood, and they've been done really well. It's a great feel for our neighborhood. It's a good fit. Hopefully, they'll be rented for a long time and lived in, and they're part of the neighborhood. But R3 is a whole different thing in my mind. And as they've already spoken, you know, I was on the zoning board when we did allow those complexes to be built in there. I think that they spoke to the impact that it's had on their neighborhood with the changeover of renters in and out of the neighborhood and that impact. And I don't know that it would be the best choice for us to change the designation to an R3. I realize the community needs more of that development, but I don't think that that means this is the right fit for that development.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from any of the board members? Mr. Sally?
So, you know, I had originally asked about this proposal on this parcel here so that everyone could kind of understand about what the applicant wants. I guess the only thing that I would just pass off to the board that I always like to think about whenever one of these comes up is that we're not deciding that parcel. We're making a vote on this entire area. As Dylan said, what we're discussing is spot zoning. But we'd like it over here, but we don't want it over there. And so just as we move forward with a vote, keep in mind that we have to make a decision here for the entire bounded area and not focus as much on the one proposal. You know, you don't want to look at it as zoning would, you want to look at it as a planning board or as a planning unit. So just add that to the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Sally. Any other comments before we roll into a vote? I see none or don't hear any. Waiting for somebody to, I guess at this time now we'd have to entertain a motion, correct, to where we're heading here. So this time I'd like to see if anybody want to either have more discussion or
I hate to put everybody over there on the spot, Denise, but I mean, if you're comfortable, I'd just like to get people's input, because I'm really struggling with this, because I know we have it, there is a need for this. And it's always, you know, I'm the first one in my business to say, well, come on, it's the greater good, and, you know, let's, you know, get going. But it, you know, I can't help but think it has an impact on those folks. And so that's what I struggle with, and I'm kind of curious what everybody else is thinking. But I mean, and Jeremy's 100% right. I'd be like, well, if you just take it over here and push that over, that's R3, that's perfect. And even if you did R2 on the R1, you know, but that's what we're trying to avoid, I think, as a board.
Mr. Steitzer.
I just make a comment that, you know, the comprehensive plan recommends more multifamily housing units, and, you know, in our community, we're picking up a lot in real estate, I think, in the last couple of years, and home prices have increased greatly. And so to say that or as Dylan pointed out, when we don't have a lot of multifamily housing units, if our demand is high or the same and our inventory goes down, then the prices for everything go up. And so by restricting the zoning for this area, by not allowing, I think, multifamily housing, we are contributing to the problem of higher priced housing in our community. So I would, I guess, have everyone keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Steitzer. And just a comment that I'd have is, I guess I feel the same way. I'm not trying to piggyback off anybody, but we are in desperate need for multifamily. And I guess is it 3 or 4 houses that are on the, I guess would be the east side of the lot, correct? Mr. Pippinich, sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman, there's 5 houses located here, 5 single-family homes that are all conforming. They all have conforming sized lots for single-family homes.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more comments, so you need to come up to the podium, okay, though, so we can get on the record. Appreciate that. Denise?
So I'll say, like, first looking at it, my thought would be, oh my gosh, east, what's going to happen with that, with the traffic in the schools? And I definitely have a lot of empathy for the homeowners there. But as Jeremy said, we have to look at it as that bounded parcel. And when it came to actually getting permits for something to go in there, whether it be a multifamily, a fourplex, whatever, that's going to be a whole different process that's going to have requirements that's going to look further into that too.
Thank you, Denise. And I do agree with that, but if we change the zoning, then we're kind of, help me out here, guys, we're pushing that too, right? We're changing the zoning, saying, hey, we're kind of accepting that. We can't just say, well, if we're just kicking it to the next people to say, well, hopefully they won't put it in R3, hopefully they won't, you know what I'm saying with that? Thank you.
Well, you include R3 in it. I mean, you could still have R1 or R2, like Dylan said. R3 is the most liberal zoning for residential, so you can still have R1, R2, but you're right. Then there would not be a need to go through a zone change if somebody wanted to come through and do R3. If it was denied, the only thing I would add is it still doesn't stop the applicant from going in front of the zoning board of adjustments and doing another zone change for that parcel. I think that's, again, we're going back into the discussion of spot zoning.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Mr. McLeod, sorry.
really, just to clarify, what we're going to do tonight is make a recommendation. Ultimately, the council is the one who decides whether to implement it or not. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McLeod, the planning board is a recommendation board, so your recommendation will go to the council commissioners, who will also hold a public hearing for this zone change request.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, at this time, it's just a board discussion, so I apologize, can't let you speak at this point. Mr. Sally.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve zone change application RE Zone 21000003.
We have a motion on the floor. Second? We have a second. First by Mr. Sally, second by Mr. Steitzer. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
We got four yeas and 2 nays, is that correct? Can we revote? I'm sorry. Forgive me, it's my first time and I flunked math and I don't know how to count very well, so I apologize for that.
Maybe raise your hands.
So can we raise our hands? All those in favor for approving the motion, state by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Right.
So we got 4-2, 4-4, and 2 for not, so thank you. All right, so that will go to the Council of Commissioners in how long, Mr. Pivenich?
Mr. Chairman, those that are out there, we will re-advertise for another public hearing at the Council of Commissioners. I don't know the exact date yet. I have to meet the advertising deadlines and stuff. So in a few weeks, there'll be another public hearing at the Council of Commissioners.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up on the agenda, section 5. So am I saying this right? Is this, now we got to discuss the CK minor subdivision, correct? But it's not a public hearing, okay. So next up would be board discussion and board taking action of the CK minor subdivision. Thank you, Mr. Pivenich.
So the CK minor subdivision is ironically the same applicants in a different location. Matt Nisler and Brown and Associates, with Chad Ball being the applicant. In this item, it proposes 2 lots for commercial development. It's located behind the Copper King. Subdivision is bordered by Wynn Avenue to the west, Motor View to the south, and public roadways access this subdivision. So here's the location, and again, the Google Earth photo is very old because there's a lot of multifamily housing in this area. The location that they plan to, apologize if you can't see this, but they want to carve out a small area here for commercial development. When they constructed the multifamily housing at Wynn Avenue, they had always planned a commercial pad at this location, kind of where the tennis courts are in this photo here. They have a development plan for that area, and the person would like to own it, so they're going through the subdivision process to split this 1 lot into 2. This is a minor subdivision by definition of the subdivision regulations. Minor subdivisions are exempt from parkland dedication requirements. By law, the governing body must approve, conditionally approve, or disapprove the preliminary plat within 35 working days that the subdivision was sufficient for review. That happened on August 17th. So they've submitted a preliminary plat application. Various departments at Butte-Silver have reviewed it and made comments. And then the planning board meeting here, again, is a recommendation board to Council of Commissioners. So there's some review criteria set for subdivisions. This is going to be pretty brief. This subdivision is in the middle of our urban area. It's serviced by water and sewer and roads, and everything is existing. And actually, the development would be permitted without subdivision, except for the fact that they want 2 separate owners. So the first criteria is effects on agriculture and waterways or water users. Would like to note, and I don't know if you can see this up here, but the Sand Creek floodplain does traverse this site. It doesn't impact any of the development in the area. They have permitted all the multifamily housing to be outside of the floodplain. The commercial development would be outside of the floodplain. But one thing that does happen when you go through the flood or the subdivision process is our subdivision regulations have offset requirements from floodplains that if you just construct on this before it goes through subdivision. So this was a lot that has never been through subdivision. Those offset requirements are now, or would now be bound to that parcel. And as you can see, some of the multifamily housing that has already been constructed would be inside of that buffer zone and offset requirements from the flood zone. Those developments were constructed prior to subdivision would be grandfathered. but they must show that on the preliminary plat. The next review criteria is effect on local services. This is a picture, this is the commercial pad that they had always planned on constructing. As you can see, all the multifamily in the background here. The floodplain is on the other side of those multifamily units. You can see the Copper King there. This is Feldspar Way. This was an access road created by Nistler during their multifamily complex project. It is privately owned. This picture is taken on Motorview Road, which is a public road. That is its legal and physical access from a public standpoint. Municipal services are in Feldspar and in Motorview and available to the site, along with any other utilities that may be required. Effects on the natural environment. Another thing to note here is that the stormwater plan was approved for this area during the development of that multifamily complex. During the design of that stormwater plan, they had taken into account this commercial space. So the storm pond and the storm infrastructure is already existing. However, drawing a lot line here means that the stormwater discharge to the pond is now off-site because it would be on the other parcel. They would have to the extent that this is approved, update that, you know, and provide an easement or whatever Public Works would require, so that if they are under two different ownerships, that at some point in the future, one owner can't say, you can no longer discharge your stormwater to my pond, because the new commercial pad site would not have on-site stormwater discharge. The next criteria is effect of wildlife and wildlife habitat. This is in the urban corridor. It's not located in any critical wildlife area. Effects on public health and safety. During the design and construction of the multifamily complex, they were required, and the road sizes and everything were reviewed by our Public Works Department, Fire Department. They were all constructed to the development standards of that commercial zone, and they all meet. Again, the easements, the subdivision requirements that the owner provide easements for utilities along rear and side yards for phone, utilities, power, and such. At the review meeting, Northwestern Energy also requested that they provide a 10-foot easement in the front yard as well along Motorview Road. That's kind of the criteria in a nutshell. This one is really this two-lot minor subdivision because everything is already existing. There's not a whole lot to review. It meets the intent of the comprehensive plan, satisfies the criteria outlined in the subdivision regulations, and complies with the C2 zoning designation. So staff would recommend approval of this subdivision. In the staff report, there are a number of conditions that would need to be met, and I'll read those. Number one, the preliminary plat is good for 3 years. At the end of this period, the governing body may, at the request of the subdividing entity, extend this time frame. 2, the final plat shall conform to the requirements of the Butte-Silver subdivision regulations and the requirements of the Montana Subdivision and Platting Act. This includes the certification by the treasurer that the taxes are paid in current. Number 3, easements shall be provided as requested by the public and private utility companies and shown on the face of the final plat. Per section 11J of the Butte-Silver subdivision regulations, the applicant must provide easements centered along the rear and side lot lines at least 10 feet in width to provide for utilities. These easements must be shown on the face of the plat. In addition, the following statement must be located on the face of the final plat. The undersigned hereby grants unto each and every person, firm, or corporation, whether public or private, providing or offering to provide telephone, telegraph, electric, power, gas, television, water, or sewer service to the public the right to joint use of an easement for construction, maintenance, repair, and removal of their lines and other facilities in, over, under, and across each area dedicated on this plat, and utility easement to have and to hold forever. Number 4, prior to applying for final plat approval, the applicant shall submit the required documentation for review and secure written approval from the Public Works Department for the following public infrastructure: compliance with all sections of Chapter 1204, construction within public right-of-way of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code, including design specifications for sidewalk. The applicant will be required to install a sidewalk. I apologize, that should be stricken from this report. That was left over from an old one. Compliance with all sections of Chapter 1304 wastewater treatment system of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code. Compliance with all sections of Chapter 1320 storm water system regulations of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code, including Chapter 1324 main extensions and material specifications. Compliance with all sections of Chapter 1332 stormwater of the Butte-Silver Municipal Code, including the Butte-Silver Municipal Stormwater Engineering Standards. Number 5, as required by the Butte-Silver subdivision regulations, Section 12-L, a weed control plan shall be approved by the weed board prior to filing the final plat. Also, as required, the applicant must submit a bond equal to the amount of money necessary to complete the approved weed control plan. This bond may be in the form of cash, surety bond, certified check, or other guaranteed negotiable instrument. Number 6, prior to filing the final plat, the plat shall be submitted to the Butte-Silver Land Records Coordinator for review and approval by the examining land surveyor. And number 7, the applicant shall be required to secure all applicable permits that may be necessary to make improvements in or near designated wetlands or surface water bodies, including but not limited to a stormwater discharge construction permit from the Montana Department of Environmental Quality Stormwater Program, a floodplain development permit from Butte-Silver County, a 310 streambed and land preservation from the Mile High Conservation District, and a 404 permit Clean Water Act from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And with that, I conclude the presentation and would welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Pivenich. Appreciate the report. I do have a question, and it's just in regard to the stormwater that you mentioned. The stormwater, you said it'd have to be discharged on another parcel. Will you explain it? Will you educate me, please?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. It's hard to see, but their proposed lot line is right here, and this being one tract, and this being another tract. And when they constructed the multifamily housing, they had envisioned this spot here being a commercial pad, and the intent was that the owner retain ownership of both of them. Well, now that they want separate ownership, they constructed the stormwater pond right here. So the original intent was that it would all be on-site discharge, but now if we draw a lot line right here, the stormwater from this parcel will still be discharged to this stormwater pond. So by creating an additional parcel, we are creating off-site stormwater discharge, which has been done before. They just need to file an easement typically, so that this person that owns the large lot can never say that the small lot can't discharge its stormwater to that pond.
Thank you. Follow up on that too. So as they're going through the DEQ permits and all that, that will kind of supersede one another, or no?
Yeah, so the Public Works stormwater permit supersedes the DEQ permit because our stormwater ordinance is more strict than DEQ's. This has already been approved by our Public Works Department. They will just need to gain that. They will need to amend that plan, and Public Works would need to approve that off-site stormwater discharge. The volumes and everything will not change. It'll still be the same, but they just have to document that it is now off-site discharge for that commercial pad.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Steitzer.
Mr. Pivenich, when you were saying that should be stricken from the record about sidewalks, was that just specific to the location? Will the applicant still have to build sidewalks there?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Steitzer, thanks for calling me out on that. That was language from a previous subdivision that didn't get removed from the conditions of approval. If you'll notice in your staff report, it references Green Lane, which is nowhere near here.
So will they still have to build sidewalks, though?
So they were required to build sidewalks by subdivision, no. So subdivision regulations require residential subdivisions to put in sidewalks. Our zoning regulations require commercial properties to install sidewalks, so they would be installed at that time. They were actually required to install sidewalks at the time of the multifamily development. They're still constructing that development, and we still have a bond on file for sidewalks on Motorview Road. So there will be sidewalks there, but it will be related to the commercial development, not the subdivision.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, Mr. Pipinich, I think you mentioned in your report something about it'll change the flood for that subdivision on some of those properties that have already been placed there?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Jackshaw, so the subdivision regulations require an offset and a buffer from waterways. When they constructed the multifamily housing, that isn't a regulation for our commercial development. They just need to be outside of the regulated floodplain. So they constructed that multifamily housing outside of the regulated floodplain, but within that buffer zone that is now going to be required through the subdivision process. So for parcels that have gone through subdivision, you need to stay further away from waterways than parcels that have not gone through subdivision. So that buffer and that offset will be required on this parcel from now on, for any development from now on. I'm sorry, is that adequate? Do I need to further explain?
It just doesn't impact what's already built there, correct?
No.
I mean, it's not like we're gonna force them to move it back, or that they're gonna run into problems down the road, or we're going to run into problems down the road with any kind of issues.
Correct,
By
no.
allowing
So
this.
everything that was built is outside the regulated floodplain and was permitted and legal. Any future development on this parcel from now on will be subject to those additional offset and buffering requirements, and they're required to be on the face of the plat.
Thank you. Any other questions? Concerns, comments? Would anybody like to entertain a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, got a motion to approve from Mr. Riley. Got a second from Ms. Jackshaw. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Moving on to other business. I don't see any other business other than welcome Ms. Jackshaw to the other side, if you will, to the planning board. Welcome. I don't know where they messed up in the paperwork. Janet leaving definitely was a lot easier when she was here. Just had to doodle and pay attention to all the smart people. Anybody have anything good to the order before we leave? Entertain a motion. Mr. Sally.
A motion to adjourn.
Give a second. Second. All right. Meeting adjourned. Thanks for